All right. Well, thanks for coming in, Doug. I really appreciate it. I thought we would just have a conversation about, your history and how long you've been with Pixar and what got you here and all these different things like history first, and then we'd go into kind of shot type work
Okay.
and your ideas about that. So, how early were you interested in animation?
Excuse me. Pretty early. I think. I kind of think always interested in animation. I drew a lot as a kid, and my interest was kind of strictly just with cartoons. Like I didn't really even draw backgrounds. Um, I didn't draw anything lifelike. I just wanted to draw cartoons over and over and over again.
Really,
So,
like how young?
well, I mean, I guess I would. That sort of taste developed over time. Um, but I definitely remember, probably like 6, 7 years old, my parents, encouraging like, that interest of mine. And I actually spent a lot of time as a kid just copying anything. I had this history of comic strips. So I would draw from that. I would copy from just the funny pages in our paper, like anything. Obviously, I loved, like a lot of people, Disney stuff.
So you weren't really from the Warner Brothers camp. You were more Disney.
I don't know. Like honestly, it was anything cartoon.
Okay.
Like um, I have drawings or like I did drawings of like alley oop, like completely outdated, like no longer like quote unquote relevant strips. I'd
You just kind of copied them and tried to get the
yeah,
technique down.
the knows best. What's that character?
Hmm. Good question.
The comic strip. He doesn't have any pupils, and his hair sticks up in the back, kind of like the chili.
Cool.
Oh, you can't print that. Sorry.
No, we can
All
we
right.
can do anything.
Anyway, but it's like if it was a cartoon, then I wanted to copy it.
Did you have access to that stuff? Because I know you grew up kind of in the boonies, right?
Yeah.
In Pennsylvania.
Yep. Sort of in the sticks, so lots of time to myself, and so that's kind of how I occupied myself. But like I say, I did love Disney, so I drew Mickey, Donald, Goofy, but I also love Warner Brothers, so I think I'm sure I ended up drawing like Daffy Duck or something. But I would draw Shoe or like BC. I drew a lot of Bloom County. I drew a lot of Garfield. Who
So it
didn't
was
draw a lot of
mostly
Garfield?
comic strips and not TV that really inspired you.
Yeah, probably. Although I loved watching Saturday morning cartoons. That's back when they had the Bugs and Tweety show,
Yeah.
so you could get a good dose of classic cartoons.
Which ones
And
did you like?
uh,
Like, did you really care? Like,
I think I really liked. Well, I remember. A distinct like childhood memory is watching that on a Saturday morning. My dad laughing hysterically at Wile E. Coyote, and then him saying to my sister and I, "Why aren't you laughing? That's hysterical." But we would just watch. I feel like maybe like a lot of kids just watch like in a complete and total trance.
Yeah.
I chose to worship silently, I guess.
Yeah, I think I was the same way. I don't think I appreciated it for what it was until later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just something magical.
Yeah, it could be anything you're watching.
Yeah, but so I was definitely an animation fan, like sort of in the dark ages. I remember I was so psyched. A friend of mine organized a birthday party around going to the Black Cauldron, which I thought was like two of the most awesome things to do: have a birthday party and see an animated movie all in one. That was awesome. um,
What was that? What was that like about? That must have been back in the 80s, right?
Yeah, totally. I had like our lovely elderly babysitter take me to a super skanky rundown movie theater to see Secret and Nim.
Really?
Yeah, so I saw Secret and Nim. That theater's totally gone. You know what? I haven't seen it since. I have like a commemorative book that I've gone through a million times. But
Was there a particular movie that kind of put you over the edge in terms of like, I have to do that? Or at what point did you realize that this was a profession?
I didn't until going to Cal Arts to but so I've always wanted to be an animator. Just the idea that, okay, what I love to draw will end up moving someday, then that I was completely hooked. It was not like any one thing. Like I say, I think somehow early on drawing got linked to like my identity. Um so drawing was like a way that I saw myself. It's like that's the thing I'm good at, so that's what I'm gonna do. And you know, the frontier was wide open. Like I say, I drew anything and everything. But then, the idea that wait, these awesome cartoons are just drawings that move. I'm sure I didn't even understand fully like what that entailed. But
Well, then how did that lead you to choose a particular school? Like
well,
you just knew that they were
my
the
parents
ones?
were really cool. They never questioned it, even though they didn't understand exactly what would become of me or how that was going to work exactly. My mom in particular, when I was about a sophomore in high school, sat me down and said, "What do you want to do?" And so I said animator. And
And what year was that? Senior?
this is no sophomore.
sophomore.
So I was in 10th grade. She had me research what schools teach animation. And at that time, this list was really short. And I found out actually she had me write to the studio. So I wrote to Disney, wrote to Warner Brothers. I got answers back from both. Actually, Warner Brothers had sent me this really awesome 8x10 glossy with all their characters.
You know, we since I worked over there,
Do you know about
we
that
sent out that same glossy to like so many.
Yeah!
Not that you were not special, but it
No, I don't. You kidding
it
me?
was the same, probably the same looking one. I bet.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah,
like I say, out in the sticks in Pennsylvania to get something.
I know
like
that's
that,
huge.
Yeah, it's totally.
We would get letters from people from like San Quentin requesting them, and it was really weird stuff. But that's awesome that you got one of those.
I gotta shake your hand, and then I have to describe that on the radio so that everyone knows that I just shook your hand.
No.
No, this is a huge service. That makes a big deal. I wish I could say that I'm as good at answering the letters, but I'm not. I'm just not. And karmically, it's gonna bite me in the ass.
No,
Anyway.
no. So Cal Arts, we were talking about
So-
that,
so-
which led you to Cal Arts. You picked.
Right, the list of schools, like of the two lists that I had, the only both put Cal Arts and Sheridan way up at the top, and then the list would get really sort of obscure from
Right.
from that point on. I remember like Kansas City had one. There's one maybe in Chicago I think the University of Chicago had an animation program. But these are like not character. I think I looked into some of these and they're just like experimental or any sort of, they're more like an art department.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, we my parents, again, very cool. We booked a trip to Los Angeles so that I could visit Cal Arts, and I brought my portfolio. I had a portfolio, cartoons that I'd done for the school paper. I had even at that point I was kind of doing some cartooning for on campus. I grew up, where Penn State University is, and so and like I say, just cartoons. Like I didn't even color, so they were all just black and white, line drawings. Took that. Bob Winquist was the head of the department at Cal Arts at that point. In fact, I think that might have been his last year. He looked at the portfolio, and he accepted me as a junior in high school. So
What year was that?
maybe 91.
91. Okay.
I graduated in 92. And so I was completely thrilled. Plus, that was the first glimpse I had walking through. Let's see, I think school had already gone out, so the department was dead, the character animation department at Cal Arts. But there were still drawings on the wall. And so I got to see a little bit of a glimpse into, oh my goodness, there are these other people that do the exact same thing. Which was the great, that sums up the entire experience for Cal Arts for me. Apart from, obviously, you're getting great education, but you're, more than anything, you're getting like incredible exposure. And whereas you are like the only, or I was, one, primarily the only like drawing kid where I came from, you get to then go to the school where everybody was a drawing kid where they came from, and they have this take on it and this take on it, and your vocabulary.
Going in, did you have any knowledge of how to animate?
No, in fact, okay. So I remember the first class on animation I think that I had was with Corny Cole, who is a vet. He had done not a veterinarian, a veteran. He animated on I think he animated for Chuck Jones. He did some Pink Panther stuff as well. Anyway, he was like, "All right, your first assignment is to animate a sneeze." But I don't think. And then he would also say, eights are like this, dot, 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 and fours are like this, dot, 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 dot. Like that was it.
Really?
And then we went up to our desks and had to animate a sneeze. I remember I just drew this head, and you really like, basic
Just went for
groping,
it.
searching for some. Yeah, just animating a sneeze. I think my character's eyeballs came out of his nostrils. But very funny stuff.
So you really, from the very beginning, were into the cartoony, like Tex Avery style, or just pushing stuff.
Totally. Yeah,
Would you say
and that's another thing too, where I think once I wouldn't ever say that I was, like Tex Avery was my North Star or anything when I was a kid, but as time went on, I think it became fairly clear to me that my sensibilities are most similar to
more on the entertainment, but like
and like you're saying, erring on the side of going too far rather than not far enough. That's like, I'd say, thematic to my approach here at Pixar too. I have to say, in a way, like the flip side of finding this great school on this like this great love of mine. The flip side is, like, socially it was so completely the opposite of where I came from. So in a way, even though I was in school, in some ways, like, I was as secluded as I was back, like, in the sticks. So I ended up doing a lot of what I had done then, which is just holding myself up and then kind of doing work. So my first year was, I'd say, pretty socially awkward, but as a result, I ended up being really, really productive. And the first semester, we had this class. It's an Amiga class.
For those of you guys who don't know what that is, that's an old computer.
Yeah, it's quite the opposite of like a girlfriend, which is what some of you might think Amiga means, to a
Commodore Amiga, which I had.
Yeah.
Very big fan of the Amiga.
Right. Anyway, so we had an assignment, and I kind of ended up turning that assignment into a short. I don't know how long it is. Probably like a minute and a half.
Yo-yo one, right?
Yo-yo boy. What is it called? Everything that comes around comes around.
The funny thing is that I saw that short when I was taking a class up in Humboldt at the CSU thing, and I just couldn't believe that anyone had done it on a computer. I was like,
Really?
how is this being done? This is amazing.
I mean, it's
D-Paint, right?
Yeah.
Deluxe Paint.
But it's not really like it's not a very computery sort of film or even style. I was basically using a computer to draw.
Right, exactly.
And so at the time, in particular, I wouldn't say I was anti-computer, but I was there to learn 2D traditional hand-drawn animation. I don't think I was angling really hard to go to Disney of all places, but I didn't know where I was going to go, but I wanted to do 2D.
Yeah.
So basically I was in this class on a computer that basically had a drawing program. It wasn't, it's not 3D. And I just started using the computer then to make my drawings, which actually is maybe I never even thought about this before, but that's my basic approach even to 3D.
What is?
That you are just using the computer to make the drawing you have in your head.
Right.
And that even though I draw certainly far less now than I did as a student, all of those drawing skills are basically a template over which you try to conform, your work in the computer.
So many people get caught up in the tool.
Right.
And whatever. And really, it just comes down to the simplicity of really just getting that basic thing on the screen, whether it's 3D, 2D, whatever.
Well, that's I think why Pixar ended up, even though I didn't have it in for computer animation necessarily, but Pixar philosophically was such a perfect place for me because here's a studio, their entire recruiting philosophy is not tool based but work based, and I was amazed that they. So after my first year with I had 2 short films in the year end producer show. I was amazed that basically Pete Docter and Andrew Stanton would try to recruit me, or were recruiting me when I had no real 3D CG experience and I hadn't even animated dialogue yet. And I remember saying that to Pete. I was like, I haven't animated anyone talking. How am I going to do that? And he's like, oh, you just learn that. You'll learn that later. So that it's really just more about the work and, like you're saying, like the timing, entertainment value, all communicating ideas, basically.
By the way, was that before or after the earthquake that they recruited you?
That was before.
Okay.
So the end of the this is totally I guess just to finish up the story. At the end of the first year is when a few people were interested in my work or interested in me coming up and joining them. Another was, I think, ILM and Colossal. Actually, Disney was asking me to submit for their story department. Anyway, I decided to stay back at school, and because my parents wanted me to get the degree, and as I said, they're very cool and supportive. So I thought that's the least I could do. The following year was the year of the Northridge earthquake, which happened right after my first semester of my second year, and that completely had kind of had put the school up on blocks, so to speak. They had shut down the main building. They were giving classes out of trailers. It was sort of a shambles, and they were offering back the second semester's tuition for those that wanted to take it, and with the option of coming back to school in the fall when they were put back together again. So I took that. I had called all of these leads that I had, and none of them were hiring or interested, except for Pixar. And even then, it was kind of by the skin of my teeth. It was only really because of Pete Docter's interest in me that I was even able to come up. Pixar had just laid off some people, put the entire Toy Story production on hiatus for a massive rewrite. They had their own kind of earthquake. And so it was really actually a bad time for anybody to be coming up, and that's certainly what the producer thought. But it took Pete to turn that sort of into an opportunity where he was saying, well, all of these machines are kind of sitting around dormant, nobody's working. Let's let them come up for free. It'll be at no cost to Pixar, and I'll just train them in my spare time. So, thank you, Pete.
Wow. So you were animator hire number what? Maybe like
I don't know.
You came after.
There might have been
was
there
Mark
probably
Oftedal up there?
Yeah.
So
that kind of recruiting drive they were doing when I first met them at the end of my first year is what got, I think, Jill Colton, Colin Brady, Mark Oftedal, Matt Lunn, Perry Farinola, a bunch of people from CalArts kind of came up in a wave, and that was really their first hiring wave for Toy Story. I was sort of in between that, obviously, and then what was like the second big wave, where all of a sudden the department went from being roughly a dozen. I think I had this idea in my head anyway that I was somewhere around the 12th animator on Toy Story. The department grew to be about 35 or so by the end, and so I came up during this total no man's land time where, as I say, the department was completely empty. I remember my desk was right across from Rich Quaid's. So there was a good number of weeks. He was out at his sister's wedding, and I had all of this time totally by myself in this ghost town, looking at people's desks, trying to figure out who the people were.
Place, right?
Yeah.
It's the same place that I sat next to you, or across from you, or is that?
See, where were we? No. This is back sort of in the triangle part of the building.
Oh, okay.
So before the animation department was where it was, I guess, on Bug's Life.
Yeah.
It was actually right next to the story department. So Pete would literally just like come down the hall, he would, show me Menvy for an hour in the morning and then have me animate Lifesaver's holes. They, I don't know.
Do you regret not staying at CalArts, or
For a
continue?
long time, I did, and certainly my parents, I took a lot of pressure from my mom to go back to school. In fact, kind of a running joke, it's still remembered by, people who were around at the time was trying to convince my mom when they would come by for visits that I didn't actually have to go back and get my degree. Nobody knew what was going to happen after Toy Story, but the object of animation school is to get the animation job, and I certainly had that. And
So you were like 19 when you started, right?
yeah, I was 19.
Wow.
And it took me a long time to.
So what was it like just starting on Toy Story? Like all of a sudden you're in school, and now I'm working. You're working on this film with all these people: John Lasseter, Pete.
It was the greatest.
It was great.
It's like, yeah, it's it's
It wasn't intimidating, or you weren't like.
Oh well. No, I was too young to be and like naive, I think, to be really intimidated. I was just so incredibly happy, because I wanted to do 2D animation, but I also was starting to recognize that I didn't really want to go to Disney. I didn't want to work on a musical. Honestly, when Pete and Andrew had come down at the end of my first year, they had a tape of Woody being acted. Oh, and this is like an old marionette version of Woody being acted by Tom Hanks, and tests that they had done, and I think Rich Quaid had done a test too, and then a test with Buzz Lightyear being voiced by Billy Crystal at the time.
Yeah.
And they'd used clips from Turner and Hooch and When Harry Met Sally, and they'd animated to them. And that really, I mean, who gives it? Who cares about medium? That's cool.
Yeah.
When that was that I was able to. I was privy to see that sort of stuff, and that it was as cool as it was. They're obviously doing something different. That completely excited me. So then to go up and, I was really young. I had no preconceived notions about what animation should be, and here we are in this like sort of pioneering medium is still sort of being formed. How do you make an entire feature when there isn't even a crew of computer animators in existence really that could do it? Rich Quaid had won a Student Academy Award animating Sand. There are people that came from stop motion. Certainly, as I mentioned, like all the other the upperclassmen from CalArts that got to go. So those were heroes of mine. I got to work with.
So you'd known about those guys already?
Oh, totally. I mean, I completely worship Mark Oftedal. His student films, I still think, are just.
So he was in the class before you?
He was the third year when I was a first.
Okay.
I don't know if he graduated either.
Well, probably not.
Probably not.
Did you learn a lot from him when you came up to Pixar?
I learned a lot from all of these people.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know anything.
I remember Mark helping out everybody, and he was a tremendous help to me.
In fact, I'll say that Earthquake and Pixar saved me from making a really crappy second year film. They saved me. I still get to have my beginner's luck student films be the entire body of my student work. So I had so much more to learn, and certainly did. It was under the best circumstances.
Yeah. Well, first of all, what was some of the first shots you worked on Toy Story?
Here's a fun. Well, this will show you how little I knew. So they needed some help in layout. I think this might even be before I was ever doing shots, but I didn't even know what layout was. And I had to lay out the shot where Potato Head he uses his eyes to look over the crowd and look out at the out of the window at kids showing up for Andy's birthday party, which we all know a layout now. From an animation standpoint, is just really bare bones.
Right.
But I half animated the thing because I couldn't help myself, and I had no idea of even the concept of how a movie was built. So I ended up animating that shot. I did a lot of toys in Andy's room. The only thing that had been done while I was, at CalArts my second year for that semester was the Green Army Man sequence. That's as much of Toy Story as they had gotten done before they shut down for the rewrite. When I came up, they were on T3, which is a sequence of Woody announcing Andy's birthday party has been moved to today. So a
Right.
big this like the company meeting for the toys. And I ended up doing. I did the stampede shot of toys kind of running towards the camera. That was like a really big deal for me. Um, and you know those it was kind of like the rest of like that time was really great just because you ended up animating absolutely
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. That was
Um,
definitely the case for a couple of movies.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's nothing that you would miss. So I mean that's I don't know if that's really interesting,
Well,
but
it is interesting just because
it was a
it's like
romantic
it
time for
gives
me.
me like a context of like, you started on this and then you went to say like the scenes with Buzz on the bed where he's doing his
Oh yeah, yeah,
laser.
yeah, yeah. No, but that was another transitional. That was a sort of a transitional shot for me
What do you mean? Like in what way?
because that was probably those might have been the first shots where I was animating Woody and Buzz, and that bit with Buzz went over really well, which really surprised me just because it's technically a pretty
Yeah.
easy thing to animate. You don't even have to
I don't know. It was
do a
it?
walk. Yeah, you just have him. You translate him linearly around the bed, and then you just have his feet kind of do
Yeah,
these quick
yeah.
moves underneath him. I'd done like a little bit of like kung fu
Right, right,
stuff
right.
in a student film of mine, and so I think that's how I ended up getting that shot.
Okay.
Buzz does like crazy kind of kung fu action before he lasers Woody, but um,
Well, how do you plan a scene? I'm always interested in the amount that you plan. You do way more than most anybody.
but I didn't then.
You
That
didn't.
was something I would learn later. Yeah, I was
You just
almost
went for
like
it?
yeah, but that's which I don't recommend. But like I say, another thing I didn't know when I got hired was really how to animate pose to pose, which is just a great way of methodically building a shot. Mark Offedal was doing that, and he was, I was just a total flail artist. I straight aheaded my like pretty much all of my student like my two student films were all straight ahead
Same here.
animation. Yeah,
I feel like I still do that
really?
sometimes. I mean, I definitely like pose to pose, but straight ahead, there's something about it. That's
Yeah,
just fun.
but I think it was because of my admiration for Mark Offedal's stuff. He just seemed to have control. Like was like completely awe inspiring.
Right.
His all of his poses were were completely picturesque, and he really had a plan from an acting standpoint. Whereas I think a lot of my flailing period is limited because the gesture like the range of gestures is limited. I guess I gotta be more specific. I would pretty much I had the style of blocking
Mm-hmm.
where instead of doing poses because I was a straight ahead animator and I needed to animate something quickly, I would just use Woody's
Translation. The
his like
root.
top level, yeah, his root, translates and rotates, and kind of just have him pogo stick up and down with his arms in default sticking out like a T. I would just kind of straight ahead to the line, so I would capture some sort of musicality from the line.
You don't do that anymore.
No, no way. I don't think it would work. I mean,
Like you don't really roughly block out stuff that rough
some
anymore.
things. I mean, like a micro gesture. Like I'll
Okay.
take that and put it into a head,
Right.
avar, or a wrist or something.
Okay.
But usually that's on top of a structured sort of pose to pose, blocking.
So when
pass.
did you move to pose to pose?
Well, I ended up just going back to Toy Story. All of his gestures then came out of like his pelvis because I was starting with this root and then with actually no other sort of like pose or no more image on top of it than that. And I was starting to notice that all my shots were kind of samey, just like and sort of over animated, not surprisingly. Whereas Mark was able to do stuff, and it's not like Mark had this market cornered. Rich Quaid, I really admired, or I idolized, I should say. Pete Docter as well, Ash Brannon could all do these have the characters act in a way where you didn't really know where the next move was going to come from, and it could come from it could be in the head, it could be in the wrist or the hand.
Sure.
Anyway, and so pretty much all of Bug's life was for me a training ground where I just tried to emulate and copy pose to pose as much, or kind of copy Mark Offedal's approach to animation as much as I could.
Well, now there's like this whole tool for doing that, the X sheet tool, right? Do you use that, or do you still do the kind of like the old school, just
Yeah, I
do the
don't.
frame and
I
then?
don't do X sheet, but that I see. I mean, because I came into computer animation so young, I don't think of myself as a 2D animator. Like even, I mean, I've never done it professionally, and I certainly didn't do it enough. Like I say, I never did pose to pose in 2D, so I don't need the computer to emulate that look or style for me. Which it's not to say that it isn't awesome. I just don't. It's just not a language.
Hmm.
Like I say, I was sort of learning pose to pose on Bugs Life on the computer.
You're
So
still on A
that's
Bug's Life, not doing the amount of planning that you were doing in the later movies.
no, that's no Bugs Life is also when I started. That's when I started going kind of crazy method and
Okay.
thumbnailing like crazy.
Well, what did that get you?
It got me, I think, better acting. Like it also slowed me down. I should say too. It's kind of hard for me to believe this, or maybe for anyone who was around on Toy Story to believe this, but I was or has been around since. On Toy Story, I was actually really a fast animator,
Hmm.
but because I would just throw myself into the shot and start animating almost without even thinking about it.
Right.
But um,
So
this
the planning kind of just thinking about other ideas, because I know that you would routinely pitch like a whole nother idea
I
to
wouldn't say
me.
routinely,
Okay, well,
but and the flip side of that is sometimes I would be given shots that require some sort of an idea that's it's not there yet.
hmm
That I would have the space for
what would be
something
one
to
of
be
those
put.
shots?
Um, well, certainly like the Woody coming out of the box shot
In
was
Toy Story 2.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's something of the routine in the boards.
sure.
Not saying that it was just like the screen goes black for 20 seconds or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
But that was like there's obviously a pretty wide range for an animator to play in with a shot like that. Um,
So the idea of the scene, basically, you're just thinking about, all right, how to milk the most entertainment value.
yeah, and I guess okay, other examples. Okay, I can kind of see. Yeah, so like the PT Flea Umbapadoo shot was something where um, the choice of actually having him dance and flail his arms around wasn't really hadn't been made in before it got to animation. Um, and I that was something where I wanted like a really big contrast.
Right.
I wanted to play up as much physicality as I could before he like kind of lets the air out and he goes instantly deadpan. So that was a case I guess where yeah, I kind of went out on a limb and had him do something really ridiculous.
Because all it was basically just a dialogue shot.
Yeah, it would be like I think yeah, in its place would have been a guy working the crowd, kind
Right.
of like with a microphone and when walking around and
Yeah.
but not like
Not like a whole dance.
not like not like a whole dance. Another one. Okay, here's another one. The shot of Flick making the telescope. Okay,
Hmm.
so this is an example too of me kind of like going quote unquote method. They had sold Flick as to the animators. They just described Flick as this guy who thinks faster than he can talk. He thinks faster than he can act, and so he can barely like catch up with himself.
And then
And I thought that was
deadpan.
such a great idea, and I wanted to see more of that in the film than I think was in there, or I wanted to see I wanted to see that physicalized. Is that a word? Anyway, I wanted to see that. I wanted to see that come into being through the way he acted, and there was a shot where he makes a telescope out of a blade of grass and a
Sure,
drop
I
of dew.
remember.
But the way the shot had come to me, I don't think they had figured out how you could make a blade of grass into a telescope, and so they had him turn his back to the camera. And I had already taken their idea of Flick, and I had sort of bored it out or in thumbnails, done a little pantomime scene, basically of a guy Flick coming in, having a thought, going out the other way, but stopping. Wait a minute, no, he has to go this way. No, got to go this way, and he changes directions a bunch.
Okay.
When I got that shot and I saw this opportunity to okay, we need to make this telescope on screen. If he's really that clever, we should see him be clever. I did figure out a way of having him roll up the blade of grass and then pop, kind of inverting
Yeah.
it, and it shoots out sort of like a camping cup or something.
So it's
And then
just
I took all of that work I had done kind of on these thumbs that had they given me the time, I would have I would have been more than happy to just shoehorn into the story and have everything come to a halt. I found the opportunity to use that stuff in that shot and have him sort of be saying one thing to Ada, but meanwhile his body is doing something else completely, looking around for the blade of grass, the drop of dew.
Yeah, I remember that shot. I remember you selling the idea in dailies. Do you think you're ever motivated, like, also by showing in dailies and getting a laugh?
Yeah, that's like that's your day in court, and
Yeah,
so you have that opportunity to put something over,
right. It's got to hit.
or fall flat on your face, which happens at least as much.
Yeah.
But I will say, just to wrap up the last thought, had I not tried to learn pose to pose animation, if I had applied basically my Toy Story approach to animating Woody to animating Flick in that scene, I don't think I would have come up with any of those choices. Um, that scene would look, I think it would just be a lot flatter if I had simply used his rude avars to kind of bouncing ball along to the music of the delivery.
There is some good use to that, though, wouldn't you say? Like
Um,
action scenes, or obviously
yeah, right,
scenes that have
right.
music. Yeah.
But if you have a concept of a character that you want to get across, or you want that character to embody, then I feel like it needs to be planned, and that's where like Mark Oftedal's stuff in Toy Story, I'll always go back to it. Like it's particularly that shot of like, you can't fly. Yes, I can. You can't. I mean, the way he's posed that out is like a progression of their emotions throughout that shot. That's like, it's not about physicalizing the music of the line. It's about physicalizing actually how those characters emotionally are traveling through that shot. And then it happens like, it's just incredibly solid.
I tend to like, I always see the pose to pose method as being great, but then also adding a little bit of what the computer does well, like flushing in a head shake, or doing some sort of little thing on top of that. Do you usually do that? Like remembering, you're blocking on Crush, for Nemo. I know I'm skipping around here, but you start really a lot with the root, especially if it's, and get that basic acting in, right? And then layer in everything. Like you rough it in, and then after you're done, like getting your idea in, you wipe out everything and start reworking things. Because you seem to have a method in the splines too, and I want to get into that kind of.
Yeah, well, I think that's another thing. I copied completely from Mark. This was easier to do even back in the days before Woody and Buzz had faces. When we were working on them, they didn't have. You had to load their faces, or load the geometry of their bodies. Oh wait, maybe not with Buzz, but definitely with Woody. Anyway, that was kind of a blessing because your blocking would always be really, really simple. You couldn't overdo it. And so, when I laud pose to pose, I'm definitely not implying that you go in with a blocking with poses that are completely, every digit is articulated and that everything is completely finished.
Sure.
So in that sense, you try to pose, get rough ideas of poses in with the fewest avars or controls possible, and so that you are as ready for changes as you can be, and so it hurts the least when you have to throw something out.
Like how simple are you talking? Like really, like
I don't know. Like I'd say our shoulders and elbows, no wrists, or
right,
sure.
Just to get the idea across.
Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't matter how many steps it takes to get the character from where they are to the door, then don't worry about the legs. I don't,
Yeah.
But this is then completely different from. There's a whole other school, kind of like you were saying with X Sheet, where that stuff is all thought out up front.
Yeah, it's definitely a more traditional approach, like more drawing.
Yeah,
based.
yeah, and there's I don't know. There's something about the way those shots are done. They have a physicality to them that's so incredibly unique. I don't think I could ever figure it out myself. But I think it's really beautiful.
Do you do live action reference?
I did a lot. I did that too. Okay, so another case of method on Bugs Life. I had the shot of the kids doing the school play, and I had looked at actually John Lasseter had given me a tape of his son in a school play, some sort of pageant, and to look at a bunch of kid behavior.
Right.
And then I had shot myself acting out this line, the kid doing the intro, I think. And that was something where I think Walsh might have done something like this with Dory. He did the crying scene in Nemo.
Oh yeah, with the camera,
but
on the computer.
I don't know. It would be interesting to compare notes. I found that actually copying exactly what you do in live action reference ends up kind of weighing it down a little bit. So I did that, and then I remember stripping some stuff out. But I'd found a take that I had done of myself that I thought was it or something, and put that in, and then I felt like I had to strip away. Like, we blink way more than you'd ever want to see a cartoon character blink. Things like that.
It's funny though, that scene in particular I had a question about, which is, you tend to kind of, like, each one of those characters had their own little thing to do. And I mean, every time I look at it, like, this guy, he's looking at a hole in the leaf, or one guy's like, blinking and then looks off to somebody else. You have like a story for each character. How important is that to you now? Like for the peripheral characters, would you have put that much energy into that if you had done the same shot today?
Yeah, probably not. I could, because the more I'm working, the more I'm starting. I think I'm learning sort of animation's place as like the deliverer of the story, and then which requires that what the pertinent story is that you're delivering. A lot of times I would get a shot and sort of be under this delusion that was the entire movie, that one shot. And so, I mean, some of it is, choose what side you want to err on. And I probably will always choose to err on the side of putting too much in, going too far, and then having to take it back. But certainly when I was younger, I think I had less and less of an idea that the performances I were making, even in tertiary characters, weren't the center of the universe.
Yeah, right.
I remember. Okay,
that was the same way.
Yeah, you can't help it. It's great.
You got no life. I'm going home. I'm pretty much single guy. Why not put some foot contact on the?
Why not write why not write a backstory for Rocky Gibraltar in Toy Story? People don't even know who that character is, but I had a shot where I can't remember. Woody's like, what? I think I can't even remember the idea. It was so insane and convoluted when I told it to. When I was trying to explain why he was behaving the way he was in dailies, which is, of course, a sure sign that you're up on the wrong foot. John was just like, "What? No, he's just a big guy." He's like, it was something like really weird where the crowd was getting bad news, and then the Troika dolls all kind of jump in together. Mm-hmm. But then the fact, like, this is embarrassing to admit, but it was like Rocky saw the Troika dolls all hop together, and the idea that they were together made him happy. That's so wrong. No,
what was his backstory?
I just thought he would be like a real simpleton, and so he wouldn't understand what's going on. But for the story, since we're actors delivering the story, the pertinent aspect of the story is actually that the entire crowd is dismayed at the news. So I was completely, overwriting this one character at the expense of the main story point. Lesson learned.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's just fun to revisit.
Do you like animation like now? Like, what do you watch to inspire yourself? Are you more of a live action guy? I know you got into acting for a while. You were actually doing stage acting. Did that help you with your animation?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, first of all, it's just a great life experience. And so life experience is like the best thing to improve your animation. And so doing anything is good. Like getting out and doing anything. But it definitely helped with my idea of understanding what the role of an animator or what the role of an actor is.
Okay.
Like I say, I try to make use of all opportunities I can. I probably sometimes go too far, and it's good to know just the difference between story and animation and story's place.
Sure.
I'm always in awe of people that are able to, um, put in a profound performance without actually really having to work too hard at it.
Sure. Just like
I
to
think
naturally
sometimes
have it.
I err on the side of working too hard, trying too hard, and
So it's really still difficult for you, the process.
uh, yeah, and yeah, I think
It's
I don't
almost,
know. I guess
yeah.
I'm sort of spinning out a little bit.
No, I totally understand what you're saying.
But acting is really good. It just feels so much better to, instead of spending 2 years on bits and pieces of a role, to be able to have an entire part from a play and
Right.
be able to perform it in a night.
Yeah.
That's like
And I perform it multiple times.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You get to do it over and over again. It becomes really meditative.
You perfect it,
We are
change it.
we are the opposite end of that spectrum.
Yeah.
And then to take it even further, I had taken some improv classes, and there are philosophies embedded in improvisation which can only help, I think, anybody in a creative field. Just about collaborating, accepting information that's been given to you, rather than
Yeah.
taking a stance of
Rebecca Stockley's class? Is that the
yeah,
one you
yeah,
took?
oh, definitely, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I had taken classes from the same school that she's a part of, um, and I had even taken, thinking that it would be like let's build a character kind of class. It was called Building a Comic Monologue. I thought it would have been something more like The Groundlings or like a Second City type of class. It ended up being a straight stand-up comedy class. Definitely helped me, just with an idea of what writing is, what jokes are.
Would you do that profession if you weren't animating anything?
Sometimes, yeah, having been through that once or twice, like, yeah, every once in a while I'll have an idea, and I'll think, oh, that would be perfect for a stand-up routine. But it's the scariest. That's the scariest.
Yeah. Especially falling flat on your face.
Oh my God, yeah, which you do, and that, but I will say that class helped me out a ton with pitching Presto over and over again.
I wanted to get into a little bit of your music background and how you apply that to animation and what your thoughts are on, jazz and how it relates to animation. I know that you've given a couple of talks that are based on that.
It's funny because that's it's highly theoretical, and I don't know if I've really completed that theory in a concrete, translating it to acting sort of way. Except that, especially when you're doing, I don't know. I guess the link is basically just that, like any sort of performance is universally understandable, or should be universally sort of enjoyed, whether you have a background in that or not. So, ballet works. It should work whether you know anything about ballet or not, and that you can speak in the case of ballet, or with movement, you can, just by establishing patterns and then creating variations, and incorporating change into pattern and the degrees to which you do that, you can basically tell sort of an abstract story, or you can go somewhere. And the same, I think, is true with music. So I was just looking at really simple pieces of music and realizing that music is the same way, that you have sort of a backbone, and then you have, usually parts are broken up like that. I mean, really obviously, like, there's a rhythm section that's like the backbone. They always talk about, like, the bass is like a backbone.
And
then you have,
what would the backbone be in terms of the animation part, like for you?
well, I think that going back to ballet or dance, or then kind of into Chaplin and strictly pantomime acting, it's about just establishing patterns of behavior that communicate a thought process, and then seeing how, in a way, the thought evolves by seeing how that pattern is interrupted or changes. Looking into Chaplin, and it's amazing then, when you kind of think along those terms, how musical, in a way, acting can be from a purely physical standpoint. And that's, I was looking at a lot of Chaplin too when we were in Story on Presto.
Yeah.
And I would say that manifested itself in the scene where Alec is on the table and he's sort of like conveyor belt walking. He's like kind of robotically walking towards the carrot and Presto keeps on pulling him back,
Travis
pulling
got
him
the way
back.
shot.
Yes, so wonderfully animated. There's a bit. There's a bit where, in Chaplin, where he's at like a hot dog stand or something, where there's like a big plate of muffins, and he's of course starving. And there's a guy behind the counter, and there's a game that they play of every time the guy looks away, Chaplin will just, really quickly stuff these muffins in his mouth. It's kind of amazing. It's like amazing that he could actually eat a gigantic plate of muffins on screen. But so then you start with like a certain, you establish that relationship. And then of course that relationship can tighten and become quicker and quicker. The more the guy behind the counter, dawns on him that the muffins are disappearing. They each take certain tactics.
Right.
They change their tactics a little bit, but it's still hanging on the spine of the tramp wants the muffin.
Sure.
We'll stuff and we'll stuff it, and then this guy doing anything he can not to really turn his back on the tramp and try to catch him in the act. Anyway,
what was that shot? And I think Rescuers Down Under with the.
Oh, totally.
Remember that shot?
Same
Same
basic
kinda
shot.
idea.
Yeah, and that's like a famous shot for the same reason. And not surprisingly, it becomes I don't know if it's easy. I shouldn't speak for Stafford, our composer on Presto, but I don't know. I think there's a structure in there that could be translatable in musically.
Well, really, mostly it's just inspirational for you, but also it's just kind of like the same structure.
Well, and it's also maybe a way of it's a way of
Well, I know you talked about it in terms of timing, obviously.
Yeah.
Like the beats. Remember that saxophone beat?
Yeah.
One?
Well, and I guess it's a way of incorporating rhythm into a scene, which is important from an acting standpoint. Again, I think rhythm can end up communicating ideas or a thought process.
Would you say
and
that?
intention, like an escalating intention.
Sure.
And then in the case, in all of these cases, you can make sort of a dance out of it. You can also then argue there's like an aesthetic beauty to this sort of stuff. I would say, actually, the sequence then in Wall-E that is when Wall-E sees the red dot. It's a really simple hook of, what is this red dot? I want to catch the red dot. But if you look at that's so beautifully choreographed, really almost just from a purely aesthetic standpoint, there's a rhythm to that sequence. It escalates really beautifully up to the run when, the dot eventually just takes off.
Right.
And then again, the music kicks in on this, really sort of quick beat. But there's also a choreography and a building of what Wall-E starts to do to try to catch the dot. I think he at first reaches out and the dot moves. So, okay, he can't do that. I think he catches up to the dot then, kind of in the second little set piece. And the dot now moves, I think, either with or without his hand prompting it. But then he puts his hand down past where the dot is to stop it. And then coincidentally, it does stop, and it zips off the other way. So the relationship is the relationship between Wall-E's hand and the red dot is sort of escalating.
Sure.
Then there's the third kind of shot. I hope I'm getting this right, where the dot now does a circle around Wall-E, and he kind of twists his body around under his head, or vice versa. And so it's now incorporating more of Wall-E's body in trying to track the thing, and it beautifully comes to this rest. And then Wall-E untwists his body, and then the dot. I don't know if that's going to make any sense on radio, but then the dot, flies away and the chase is on. So it's just like it's such a beautiful way of ratcheting tension and immersing Wall-E in his involvement with this pursuit. I don't know everything, in that, particularly in that when we're on the trash planet, develops in such a wonderful, completely immersive way like that.
Yeah, it really is like a dance, and it's just choreographed.
Yeah, and it's so much better than just having dialogue of like, "What's that dot?
Yeah.
Get back here, you dot!" It's like.
I want to get into talking to you about Presto too, just because, obviously, this was your directorial debut. But before we get into that, can you talk a little bit about that transition of animator to directing animator to supervising animator, being directing animator, no, actually supervising animator on Bounden, and then supervising an animator on Cars. What was that transition like for you?
Um, yeah, well, I guess I was a directing animator on Monsters Inc. first,
Oh, okay.
and that was really kind of like being um, it was pretty similar to actually being like an animator, or something like a Pixar equivalent of maybe a lead or something, even though it wasn't specific to a character
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. Um, but I think the idea was that I would have maybe a little bit more of a presence in dailies. You work more with model testing. Obviously, you're
Yeah.
more involved in pre-production, so there's that part of it. Um, but you're still expected to do a lot of animation, and the idea I think is to lead by example. So in that case, it was not too different from animating. And supervising on Bounden, I took as an opportunity to um, I at that by that point taken a summer course, like a fully involved, actually like a miniature MFA summer program in acting at
Oh, yeah, I
ACT.
remember that. I remember going to see your thing. You were sitting at a desk or something.
Oh my goodness, you went. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I forgot. So I came back and I maybe went because Bounden is such a simple piece. It doesn't really require like big fat like method. But in any case,
Yeah.
I did uh, I did hand out a kind of I think a practical guide to acting is I think what it's called. It's a bunch of Mammoth students a bunch who wrote a book kind of on like a Mammoth approach to acting,
Wow, I
which is
love
great.
that.
And so it was just a way of even being able to analyze your scene and
You still use that method, obviously?
not really consciously,
Okay.
but I think it certainly has an influence. Yeah, we were kind of talking about this before, how acting is a lot of fun because you take on a role in such the opposite way as you do in animation.
Right.
You get to like actually live an entire part, nightly for a while, and you can complete the part in a single, evening. But I would say, I actually, before doing that, we had kind of a freelance acting teacher, Danny Shea, come here
Mm-hmm.
to Pixar, and even after that course was through, a small handful of us would take classes with him privately, and that really actually opened my mind up to the depths that you can plumb in a role. And I think I went into those classes somewhat with the expectation that, oh, this is acting, we'll be able to burn through these parts. I won't be I don't know. I won't be encumbered by
Can you?
the animation. It's a slow animation process.
Right.
But what we found in working with Danny Shea, he would give us a short scene that was like 10 pages or something out of a play, and we would do a quick read through. And I think our goal was really just to find beats, but we would read to the bottom of the page, and I think my memory is getting kind of foggy, but he would be, okay, so wait, what's going on here? It was almost like he wouldn't even let us get past the first line, Okay, what do they really mean?
Right.
Let's come up with kind of an actable goal, or goal for this character. What are they doing? What are they doing in saying this? What's the subtext? What do they want to achieve in this single line? So all of a sudden, we were now acting at the same rate that we animate here, really, really slow. But
I
it
never
just
really realized that because we always just do improv here, and analyzing a line like that sounds so much different.
yeah.
I mean, was it like, I don't know, like I always feel like the good actors, it's all from their gut, and how
Yeah,
much
but
of
it's
it is.
well, but then you can actually you can almost spend as much time as you do animating, just as an actor, I think, coming up with backstory and what's really behind this line. And obviously, it should be appropriate to the overall story. So a lot of it depends upon your ability to analyze the story that you're trying to perform, or the role you're trying to perform. But there can be so much going on. There can you can define so much about who the person is,
Hmm.
interpreting just that written text. In the same way that I feel we as animators can do that with body language played sort of underneath that spoken line of dialogue. Even though you get an inflection with a line
Right.
that suggests something, you can still color that
It's
in an infinite amount of ways based on the angle of the head or what the character's doing with their hands.
it's almost like William H. Macy when he came here. He said we kind of do the opposite of what an actor tries to do, which is they try to learn the lines so that it feels improvisational, and we're like
Right.
analyzing
Yeah.
every inflection.
Yeah. So that's totally true. Where ultimately we have to work from the outside in, and we can't really work from the inside out, and just, I guess, in a way, not know externally what we're doing, but just feel it. Like,
Yeah.
ultimately, we're gonna have to translate that into sort of this exterior sort of approach.
But what you say about coloring the inflection and like changing the performance if it's not there is really pretty interesting. Just because I don't know, it just seems like you can really make a flat line almost better. In a
Oh
sense
yeah,
with
those
a
are
good performance.
yeah, exactly. Then you're not limited to sort of the take that, oh well, this scene is not a big scene, it's a small scene. Like that has no meaning anymore, because you can make it big just in not in size but in specificity and in meaning. You can add some, like, I actually really relish scenes like that are just to get you from A to B. Those I find that maybe because they're almost sort of they're just, maybe because they're not seen as huge acting opportunities, actually they kind of give you the room.
Some entertainment to be milked or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, you can make things a lot fuller by not neglecting a scene like that. And the same thing with, like, oh well, I don't like this performance, the vocal. I'm not a big fan of this actor, first of all, and yeah, it's flat, but it kind of, in a way, just gives you more room.
I want to get into kind of, Presto and how you came up with the idea. You took a year off after Cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in that time, were you just coming? I mean, I know you were spending time with your kid,
Yeah.
but how did you come up with the idea for Presto?
Total necessity. I really wanted to. It's funny. I had all this time, and I thought I was going to use it to write, kind of like in the big sense. It doesn't work out that way, I don't think. At least not for me. I did do a lot of writing. I did a lot of starting and not a lot of finishing, which I find, that's what the deadline is there for. And I now
what you
worship
mean.
at the altar of the deadline. It's like what gets the thing done. Anyway, at the year was up. I didn't have didn't have anything concrete, really. I had yet to turn an idea into a story, which I only had even the inkling that there was a difference between the two.
The way that you came up with ideas, was it just like random, or like, you wanted to develop a children's book, or something you saw in a restaurant one day?
No, they're all,
It's
brain farts, really. It's nothing more glorious than that.
Okay.
It's just, it'll either be, most of them are, I follow like high concept devices. So for me, it was like something like the hats is like pretty much what I came in with. Hats, magician and bunny. But going back to the necessity of it, I came to was talking a lot with Mary Coleman in development. Lindsay Collins was helping me kind of think avenues out, and I actually didn't think I had a short idea at all. But they both kept on coming back to me. Well, there's no short in front of Wally. There's no short in front of Wally. Well, I don't have a short idea. And then we just went back and forth like this for kind of a while at the end of that year, December, before Christmas. And finally, I got what they were saying, which is like, you should pitch, there's no short in front of Wally, I think is what they were saying. And so I got off the phone with Mary, I think at that point. I turned to my wife, and I was like, okay, I have to come up with a short. I don't have a short. I had pitched a short 100 million years ago at Pixar, back when they were doing the rounds for what became Jerry's Game. And It sort of had a teleportation device in it. It was sort of based almost entirely on the Tex Avery gag of the wolf ties up Droopy, goes on a boat, on a plane, on a train, up a mountaintop, and is in the tundra, and then locks the door 100 times, turns around, and there's Droopy. It was basically
Right.
like, Droopy has this, or my Droopy equivalent had this magical power of as soon as the camera pans away, he can all of a sudden be on the other side. It was actually totally based on that student film I did of the yo-yo. Only that rather than being a yo-yo is this character. That didn't go anywhere because it's just a one-note gag. There's no character behind it. So oddly, like over 10 years or more in kind of picking at it here and there, I was like, okay, well, if there's a magician, then you kind of justify magic, this kind of inexplicable thing. So it should be, instead of, my wolf and Droopy facsimiles became a magician and a rabbit. At that point that I got off the phone with Mary saying, I don't have any shorts. My wife and I brainstormed for literally like 20 minutes, and we came up with the idea that, okay, rather than it being the camera as a device, it should just be the magician's hat and then just another hat. So teleportation between two hats. Then, like, everything kind of, the snowball started rolling, and we came up with something of like a relationship between the magician and the rabbit that could go forward. Nothing like what was in the short.
What? How so?
What was it? Oh, it was the seeds of what became kind of the first outline that I ended up pitching to John and got greenlit. Again, the total opposite. It was, I think it was something like, it was the magician whose bunny left him. So the magician gets a Dear John letter at the beginning of the short. He's without bunny. He can't go on. He can't go on stage. His act is over. But then he gets to knock at a door from a little bunny who just wants an autograph. Like a little, fanboy bunny or hare. And so pretty different. But it was funny. It was like the next morning, I think, I call up Mary Coleman again. I'm like, okay, I got a short. And so then over the new year and through January, she really helped. She devoted a lot of time workshopping it with me and developing a pitch. And, I had a lot to learn, and still do, about pitching and how to get an idea, especially a visually complex idea like this teleportation thing, across verbally with just beat boards. It's,
And then it's just kind of evolved.
yeah, the story changed a lot.
Story
Addressing notes.
changed.
I also got a lot of Andrew Stanton's time,
Really?
which was invaluable.
Stylistically.
Wait, is
did you
invaluable
always-
the opposite of valuable? It just should mean more valuable, or does it mean this is kind of like Three Amigos?
I'm not really a
Invaluable
English teacher. I don't know.
Sounds like it actually means it was worthless. That's not what I mean.
No, I think you're right.
Okay.
You're correct in your grammar.
But it should be ultra valuable. I mean, invaluable means not valuable.
You're
It's
right.
turning into a bit.
I should contact my fourth grade English teacher, Miss Hadala, and ask her back in New Jersey.
She would know. She's the authority still in your life.
Did you always have a stylistic, vision, like that you wanted it to be old school, kind of Tex Avery, Warner Brothers style?
No, in fact, this is where the thing that I've heard a bunch of times about you can go in with your three ideas. Say, I've heard this a lot, and that there's the one you think that's going to have like the Pixar edge, you're playing it to Pixar sensibilities. And then there might be the one that you're like, no, oh man, this will get shot down kind of first round. I've heard a lot that Brain Trust or John and Andrew, maybe as creative, VPs or execs, will actually go for the one you think, there's an uncanny sense almost of like which one. It's not like they're trying to pick the one that you don't think is strongest, but it's so you can't play to them. You can't try to second guess what they're going to like, really, ever. So what I had done with Presto, and I didn't pitch three, I only had this one. I thought, like, okay, we'll make it like a we'll have a sort of buddy movie, sort of a more of a sitcom relationship between these two. It'll just be a big misunderstanding. You know, the magician's desperate, so he's just going to take this bunny off the street, try to throw him on stage in front of the world, basically, and it all kind of falls apart from there. You know, but the bunny's sympathetic, and the magician's basically, he's sympathetic. You know, we sympathize with his situation, and I don't know why I thought that was necessarily even Pixar. Now that I think about it, but in any case, that completely fell apart. Not because they didn't like those two characters, but the story just took too long to tell. And actually, I have a whole talk about this now. But in simply trying to shorten it, to truncate it by trimming taking out sort of an event in the middle.
Right.
The characters completely fell apart. We needed to set up an antagonistic relationship actually as soon as possible, and it turned into a fight more. I mean, it kind of always was a weird fight anyway. I guess just more innocent. Anyway, but it was out of that necessity that we started looking at classic cartoons, just because no one beats those cartoons with setup time. That's the other thing is we ended up going long over, but Presto was supposed to be 3 minutes. It's actually a little bit over 5 now, which
Start to finish, it was about a year in production, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I
came on around.
When you factor in post production, sound, and film imaging, it was like 16, 17 months. But this is more of if Presto sort of got greenlit in March. All of the from there throughout the summer, we were in crazy crisis story mode, and it was sort of in there that we were, I think, kind of feeling our way through classic cartoons and trying to use that as a model just for economy and clarity.
Magical Maestro.
Yeah.
Or just, I know we looked at a lot of those
yeah.
Stimpy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so...
Yeah, when did you come on Presto?
I think,
I can't remember.
I came on just as...
Like in the middle of the summer, maybe?
Alec and Presto were being kind of, in a sense, finaled, character-wise.
Okay. Yeah, that might have been like midsummer, and we still hadn't really nailed the story. Although I think we were probably on the right track.
It was pretty close.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I can cite my favorites were Magical Maestro, Tex Avery, Long-Haired Hair, which is the one with Leopold,
yeah.
And then that for Warner's, and then I think Tom and Jerry's are really underrated. I don't know why they don't get mentioned more. But
I mean, Tom and
Jerry at the Hollywood Bowl?
I just love the timing in general that MGM had, and they had it just seemed more polished and just seemed more time than Warner Brothers.
Yeah,
a little bit more money.
Or maybe. Yeah, I think they. I have no idea historically, but I just imagine MGM, they were probably pretty flush, and so they definitely had production value. It seems more along the lines of Disney, just as far like fullness of animation and.
Yeah.
Doing pretty awesome, pretty beautiful stuff, actually, in their cartoons.
I'd love to talk about what you took away with, the experience of directing. Not that we're by any means done, but would you have done anything different? What did you kind of get out of everything?
What my big mistake, if I were to, kind of post-mortem myself, was that I didn't spend enough time in animation looking at the whole thing. And I got really kind of, I think my direction in animation was too myopic and shot-centric. And what I found, I just wasn't, I've never been on anything after animation. So I had kind of no way of knowing actually how much, I don't know, what the whole thing is supposed, what do you do after animation's done? What I found was, because we animation, we were over budget. You guys all got kind of pulled off.
You were the last one.
Yeah,
you were the animation crew and director and.
Well, and so the show wasn't even really fully animated in some cases. Again, certainly not by any fault of the animators, just because we couldn't afford to, you guys, really finish it. But that the timing then was really slack. So that's really my fault, and it's not circumstantial. So So then I had to. We were able, I think, to cut something like. Am I wrong? Maybe that was story. It's amazing what you can do in editorial.
Yeah, I don't think that we actually cut
We didn't.
shots that
No, we didn't cut shots, but there was a point, and so this is actually totally tangential, but in story we did. I remember at one point it was kind of fat, and running time. Obviously, we were always over running time. We were always going to be over 3 minutes. Even Brain Trust knew that.
I also know that you guys weren't supposed to have really a crowd, and then there.
Oh yeah,
this
yeah,
huge
yeah.
crowd, which literally got animated by you and Mark Walsh in 2 days.
Well, and Matt Webb, who deserves
yeah.
a lot of credit.
He did all the sim.
Yeah, and if he was the equivalent of what sort of I was to the animation department after the fact. I mean,
right.
Matt Webb did
Absolutely.
a lot of like finessing and nipping and tucking and making sure that that stuff was.
But
like,
the basis of all those cycles was done in a weekend, in a sense, right?
Yeah, we did it in like 2 or 3 days. Okay, wait. Let me finish one thought. Oh yeah, okay. So we ended up cutting 20 seconds, just in 20 seconds out of like 5 minutes. That's a lot, just in trimming. So it's a similar sort of thing happened when in animation after you guys had left, where I was able to kind of go in and just retime it a little bit, and then just a little bit of polish here and there.
Well, you animated a lot of shots as well. One notable one being the one where he comes out of the hat at the end.
Yeah.
And that has kind of like a very stylistic, kind of like Sweetland-ish.
Yeah,
look.
I couldn't help myself.
Now, what is kind of, how do you get such big shape change in your work in general? I noticed that just the fluidity of the poses and just, you're literally going into every frame, it seems.
Yeah, that was, and I really don't advocate that. Except for, in that case is like the most extreme.
Right.
I think kind of animation, wild flailing animation. I really, this is just my approach. Everyone has their own approach and everyone's right. Take the, okay, anyway, but my approach really, I really like to let the computer do the work, and I just, a lot of my preparing for a shot is about setting the model up and the posing up such that the computer can, I can do the most with the least amount of AVARs. That's really my philosophy. So in that case, I totally went against my philosophy. I found, first of all, because in Presto, being able to, he was basically a Ratatouille rig with like a new head. So we had all of the bells and whistles.
He was kind of like the lawyer with a new
lawyer body,
but then
brand new head.
Yeah. Who did the articulation on that? It was Ian.
Ian Staplowski and Mark Peretti did awesome jobs, especially with Alec. Yeah. Alec's body, where they really couldn't steal anything. We had to kind of figure it out. We didn't, that's not like we had tried making turning a rat body into a rabbit, didn't work, given like the rat's kind of saggy britches. Anyway, so going back to Presto and flailing around, I found that I had to, just to get, as I'm breaking joints, and you just want to get the hands to register in a smooth arc during these, like wildly quick, kind of whips. I found that I was having to do a lot, and I rarely kind of use bend bows, which is like, I try to do as much as I can with as little as possible. But there I found, again, because it's so quick, and I really wanted the arms to be almost like distortion drawings, or, and I wanted to create in the motion blur these like kind of dry brush strokes and go really 2D.
That's interesting. The motion blur, I remember, kind of dulled it down.
Yeah, well, we were ending, we pushed, again, like hats off to technical, because
Tony
Apodaca's amazing technical crew.
Abracadabra, as he's known.
Abracadabra, as we call him. And he magically appears or disappears. Let me just give a shout out to Christine Wagner's awesome tuxedo design, first of all. And but then Jacob Brooks and Todd Krish's work. They had to keep clothes on this guy, this like most wildly animated character. And they it really made that suit look natural and designed at the same time. Unbelievable. But then in the case of motion blur, similar situation where we were pushing this character so fast, especially with like Travis's tap dancing stuff, the hoedown, arm flailing, Andy Schmidt's some of his shots with I think like the poke in the eyes or
the ladder gag.
I don't know if we did that with ladder gag. I think we were good there, but there were certain shots where he was moving so fast that in motion blur he almost dematerialized, like he almost kind of vanished. If our sort of natural Pixar motion blur is like a dry brush. It's like the dry brush stroke got so incredibly dry and diffuse that the hands and like the tap dancing, like the feet, kind of all but disappeared.
Yeah.
So we came up with comp tricks, compositing certain proportions of unmotion blurred with motion blur, so that we could at least keep hopefully some of the outline. A lot of those 2D motion blurs.
So it's almost comped in front of the motion blur?
Yeah, right on top. Kind of like, almost like you're caught in a mid-cross dissolve between the two. And so, you can see it in like maybe 8 or 10 shots. The flailing shot, the ballerina shot being one of them, tap dancing another, and more throughout. But we wanted to also try to, that was our way of faking a leading edge. That's the other thing that we don't get with Pixar motion blur, is the fact that, like, if an arm is whipping up, the top edge of that arm, if you were to do like a distortion drawing, would be strong, and then the distortion in 2D would be kind of trailing behind or down. In Pixar motion blur, it really it's an equal sort of blurring on both sides of the action, the forward and
so
backwards
what did you guys paint?
No, we just like I said, we just would take the non-motion blurred image, kind of ghost it a little bit, and then match that with the motion blur to hopefully you get both a leading and trailing edge with the non-motion blurred image, but
Sure.
Then you also get that smear with the purely motion blurred image.
Well, that's.
All right, is anyone still with us at this point?
No, I really that was one thing that I really thought was amazing, is that in doing all that single frame animation, when you throw it through a render, it takes out a lot of that snappiness, but it was really just a great decision to kind of do those comp tricks and see that, because a lot of the times you could have just sent it through and then you get what you get.
Yeah. Right. It gives again like a sort of solidity to those parts.
I almost wish that animators had control over that all the time, the motion blur and how it trails.
Yeah, it's I think from what I've heard anyway, it's kind of the equivalent of animators. They have to let it. Drawn animators have to kind of let the scene go through cleanup, and it's you want to control that process, but ultimately it's maybe out of your hands, and it's just part of the way things get done. But
well, that being said, would you want to control cloth sim? The posing.
No way. Those guys are seriously. They're
well, some
they're
aspect
Spartans.
of
Those
it.
guys handle that stuff. I don't think I could ever.
Well, I'm not saying the actual setup and the everything about it, but I'm just talking about, like, if I want a guy to put his hand on his shirt and bring it up, or do I want to affect the pose of it in a sense, almost like having tools to push shape.
Oh, man, yeah. Well, one of the things that I don't know, man. It's a different art. It's a different art doing that sort of stuff. It's not. It's not, in a way, like, as hard as animating a character is. It's still like somewhat of a simple translation system where, like, left and right on this control means the arm goes up and down. So you can, like, okay, there's a direct relationship there. One of the things that was sort of left undone was Matt Majors animated the shot of Alec in the cage, that establishing shot.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. But he just didn't get around to doing the stomach growl. Or he did a really, really quick pass and he had to go. Well, to give you an indication of how actually difficult it was to get that, I animated it like, I think 5 or 6 times after he had gone, just to try to get something that didn't look like an alien was going to burst out of his guts, or it's a sort of a shape deformer that you're that's inside of him.
Right.
And those first 5 passes that I had done after Matt was off the show.
You were just sending it through, seeing how it looked each time, and
Yeah, right. And you're also kind of working blind because you don't
Yeah.
know how fur is going to react to it, and there's a question of exactly how should that device work. Does it should be like rippling water, or I kind of used it as a ball, but again, it looked like alien. And people had like really disgusted associations. They were really revolted by this thing for a long time. And this is one of the last things on the show that I was doing. I was like, oh my, like we have to the whole bit kind of came into question. And it was
you just wanted it to look like a cartoon.
Yeah,
like,
right. But there's no, it's something where you can draw it and everyone kind of knows what it's supposed to mean. But as soon as it's in this 3D space, it can look really disturbing. Anyway, I'm just saying I do not claim by any means to be an expert of what I think simulation and cloth deformation is much more along those lines, where it's a mystery. Those guys, it's a different art form.
You wanted to stylize the effects as well, right? Like the puffs of smoke.
But I think in the same way that I had to find a solution specific to that stomach growling situation, like we had animated colliders, just some primitive objects into the curtain for that shot of like fighting behind the curtain. And then that goes off to Jacob Brooks. And this is kind of a huge, it's so big that we can even do that these days. So just remember when we had to animate Sid's shirt on Toy Story. It's total old timer talk. Yeah. But the fact that we can run a, what's that?
I wasn't on that movie.
You weren't? Well, believe me, it's true.
You had to animate what?
They had to animate Sid's shirt sleeves. There was some process
like
that sort of
plastic shirt.
Yeah, a plastic shirt. Yeah. Anyway, that was talk about non-intuitive. That was hard. Anyway,
yeah, that's true.
So even that we can run some sort of simulation process on what it will be like a curtain looks like all hell is breaking loose behind it, but it still looks like a curtain. It's just not like freaking out.
The weight is correct. Everything.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, that's you're talking like that's artful degrees of technology.
Yeah. Brad Bird was talking about the weight of like Milt Kahl's clothing that he would animate and how it just felt perfect.
Right.
And that it was really just difficult to get. I imagine it's obviously so difficult to get that as well in CG,
Yeah. Okay. So sorry, I keep doing this. To complete the story, back to Jacob Brooks, and like Artful Sim. In talking with him, when he would show me what he was doing, he's like, "Yeah, I took your colliders kind of as a suggestion. I mean, he has to then go back into that total world of the unknown and tame this like the mysterious beast that is Sim, and basically come back around through some completely circuitous. No, I don't know. That's
a good word. Is
that one
that's
that
a $10 word.
Doppelowski knows? What's her name? We need her on the phone.
Circuitous.
Oh, what is it?
Circuitous.
Thank you.
Circuitous. Okay.
Circuitatory.
Say
anyway,
that 3 times fast.
Nah,
I'm just joking. Okay.
I already lost it.
So he went
in a roundabout way. This is totally Porky Pig. In a roundabout way. He has to arrive at the solution that you gave him in the beginning to make it sort of look like what you want, but it has to be done in a completely different way. So anyway, that's the longest answer to your question. I think
that's a really great answer. And probably to conclude, the last question I just wanted to ask you before we go to lunch.
Oh,
actually,
man.
do you have to go right now?
Nope.
Is really just for the students out there, what would you suggest they do to prepare for a career in animation or while they're in school? Is there anything that any advice you can give to students out there? What they should do while they're in school, what they should focus on, things that you kind of wish, you had known about when you were a student.
Well, I don't know.
So is it all about making a film?
Yeah, I don't know, actually. Because a lot of what I was learning early on as an animator was deprogramming the sense I had in my head that I was I was the filmmaker, because an actor is not a director, and animating, at least doing character animation at a studio like Pixar, is really more the work of an actor. So it's a separate discipline, and having a student film with a beginning, middle, and end shows. It is really good just to show that you understand story, because to act you have to understand. You do have to have an understanding of the story you're in. But just knowing that the acting side of it is really what you're going to end up doing. Focusing on performance is really important. Sometimes you see short films where it's kind of like the job description that's suggested is filmmaker, but a studio doesn't. I don't think a studio really knows what to do with a filmmaker, because you're not going to get hired as a director. It's not the way I see it.
Yeah.
So you can have if you want to be an animator, obviously focus on animation. It'd be great to work within a story. But if you have even just short scenes or shots that show, a grasp of character, character through behavior, that's huge entertainment value. Obviously, a sense of humor is pretty important. I don't know. Actually, scratch that.
No,
it doesn't
that makes
matter.
total sense. I mean, I
But
totally agree with you.
I would say, and it's tough. Like the most important, I think, is just developing an eye, and actually watching as much as possible.
What's good in a sense. And,
Yeah,
watching good films.
Yeah, over and over again. I think the more you, I don't know, just watch. Even if you're just watching the same thing that you love over and over again. What's that?
I said, do you still recommend, all the silence?
Oh, totally.
Chaplin,
but only if that's really you have to follow your own interest.
You kind of convinced me a little bit. Like I was a little bit when you're like, all right, let's watch some Chaplin. When we would do it during production.
Oh yeah.
I kind of sometimes I just get Chaplined out, because it's always the reference. For animation, but it really is pretty genius stuff.
No, definitely. And in a way, it's like that it's really hard to do well, pantomime acting. And it's kind of like going to see Shakespeare a little bit, where it's like the first 10 minutes, this is even true to a degree with kind of all theater. It's just a different mode. And the first 10 minutes are kind of almost out the window, because you're simply acclimating yourself to a new way of receiving information and being immersed in a story. And in a way, challenging to an audience is because you really have to put on a different sort of entertainment hat or, audience member hat than you do with certainly like anything you're going to see done by anything else in animation. Most of what you see in movies at all, you just have to watch sort of with a different pair of eyes, but it doesn't, anyway.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, I really do appreciate you coming in and doing this, Doug. Thank you so much.
Oh, no sweat.
And
my pleasure.
Obviously, it was such a great experience working with you, and
likewise.
Congratulations on the success of Presto.
And back to you, sir.
All right, thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Okay, so today we have Doug Sweetland with us today, who is, how long have you been with Pixar?
You said today twice.
I did?
Sorry, you got to do it again.
All right, I got to do it again.
That's just some advice.
All right. Today we have Doug. Wait. Today we have Doug Sweetland with us today. No, all right.
See,
I can't.
You got to throw out the idea of today. It's tainted.
Yeah.
It's not fresh anymore.
All right. How about just thanks for coming today, Doug. I really appreciate. I will do that. No.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, so we have Doug Sweetland with us today, who has agreed to spend some time with us talking about just a whole bunch of things I wanted to kind of do. So thanks for coming today, Doug. I really appreciate it. I can't do this straight face with you.
You said it twice.
Okay. Okay, here we go.
You should start by just saying, this is a Tuesday, and if you're not listening to this on a Tuesday, it's the wrong day.
Okay.
No, it's always going to be it's always going to be today, no matter what day they listen to it.
Okay. All right. Let me just compose myself. Sorry, man.
Wait, can I go to the bathroom?
Yeah, go to
This
the
is a
bathroom.
okay, I'm gonna go to the bathroom.
All right, you go to the bathroom, and then I'll do it while you're gone.
Okay.